Those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to this very special bonus episode of the Wild Die podcast. This is a Savage Worlds podcast for beginners and veterans alike. And today we've got a very special guest on the show today. His name is Eric Lamoureux. Say hello, Eric.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
It really is an honour, although I have to say your fees are too high. But today we've got a very special show because we're doing a review. Isn't that right, Eric?
Yeah, that's our second review of the month. That's our review special, the 2-for-1 special. So today is Accursed. Last one was Sixth Gun. So today, yeah, Accursed. Very, very different setting, but very good one.
Yep, can't wait to get into this. So, let's not hang around here in the intro. Let's talk about this book, shall we?
Let's go between the covers. Is that the title? We haven't had that segment in so long. I don't remember the name of it.
I think
it is between the covers.
I think it's. I think it might be. Let's just go. Let's go.
Oh yeah! Welcome one and all to Between the Covers, the hottest and most greased up segment on this podcast. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Things are gonna get a bit weird in here.
No, it's nothing sexy.
Sorry, what?
It's kind of where we talk about a Savage Worlds book from cover to cover.
Like some sort of book club.
Well, essentially, yes.
Well, in that case, I'm leaving. Oh yeah. See you later.
All right, let's do this. So, yeah, Accursed, well, it is a dark fantasy setting in which you play monsters. That's the basic, the most fundamental idea behind it. Of course, there's a lot more to it.
Do you mean monsters do you mean monsters like in the metaphorical sense, like Jeffrey Dahmer or Charles Manson?
No, it's real monsters. If they were just kind of monsters like you say, like Dahmer and all that, that'd be basically Solomon Kane, right? Because you've been playing that campaign, and that's pretty much what it's about.
Good point. Right? Sorry to derail it instantly. Carry on.
No. I mean, it's a good point because you play actual, werewolves, half vampires, snake people, golems, that type of things. So you're actually a real monster, and you're also a bad person trying to redeem yourself. But we'll get into that later. Well, the details first. Well, that was published in 2013 by Melior Via. It is produced by John Dunn. Written by Jason Marker and developed by Ross Watson. So that's quite the stellar cast there. If you're a Savage Rifts fan, Ross Watson worked on that quite a bit. He's worked on Warhammer 40K also. Quite famous guy. So there's quality staff on this. The book is 153 pages. So not too short, not too long, not too big of a book. The PDF goes for $20, and for print, you have to look a little bit. If you go on DriveThru and you want to do the POD, They're quite pricey, but that's typical to print on demand. They're usually more expensive. But looking for this, I found my hardcover copy on Amazon for $35. So that's a pretty good deal for that size book. You don't get the usual glossy pages that you get in books, so I'm guessing this is some type of print on demand as well. I don't know where it's coming from, but you've got the pages that are kind of thin. They'll kind of curl up a little bit if it's humid in your house or something like that. The illustrations are a bit faded compared to the PDF, but it's still a pretty good deal for $35.
Did you maybe it could have been like an earlier version of it or something like this? I don't know. But still,
could be. I mean, it was printed 2013. It's got ISBN number on it, so I'm not sure. I mean, it still looks good. It's just not as crisp as the PDF.
It's still a great deal for the money. I mean, you get to play as a snake man, or a mummy.
Yep, exactly. And one more thing to know about Accursed is that it requires the horror companion, and by requires, I'll get into the details later. I don't think it's like if you don't have it, you can't play it. It's just you're gonna miss out on a couple things if you don't have it. So it starts out with a short fiction by Andy Chambers called Hunted, and that sets the mood. I think it gives you a good idea of what it's like to be an Accursed, and I'll get into that soon too. And you can get this short fiction. I think it's about 8 pages long. You can get it, pay what you want on DriveThruRpg. So, just to check it out. And you can also get 3 more novellas on there as well. You can buy them.
Is it any good?
I haven't read any of the novellas. I read the short fiction. I like it quite a lot. It's like I said, it makes you feel like you're in the setting. It gives you a really good idea. That this harkens back to me to days like in the 90s or 80s where most RPG books had short fictions, usually between chapters. Now it's moved on to sometimes it's just an illustration or even sometimes comic book strip. But I really like that part. It gets you into it.
Well, I find that like with a lot of players, they don't want to read the book or read about the setting. You can just give them that and say, just read that. It's 8 pages. It'll give you a feel for the setting. And they might read that. I mean, probably not because they're players and they suck and they don't want to put the work in. But they might, Right.
Well, it's easier to read, 8 pages to get an idea of the setting than to have to read the whole book, which I think most of this book, the 153 pages, are actually just the story. It's just what people call the fluff. It's a very fluff heavy game, I think, where there's not a whole lot of mechanics to it. It's just pure immersion from cover to cover. Chapter 1, this is the land of Morden. This is the world that you play in, the campaign world, purely fictional world. But as you'll see, it's kind of purely fictional. But you still get some references to our world, and you'll understand in a little bit. So it's about the Bane War. What happens is you got people in Morden. They're living, they're doing their own thing. To the east, there's this giant mountain range, impassable mountain range, and out of nowhere comes these witches, these powerful villains. There's 13 of them, and they come in, called the Grand Coven, and they come in with their Banes, so they're monsters, and they hired mercenaries, and they invade Morden, starting with the Outlands, where they're not ruled by anybody, really. There's just nomads and people living there. And then they conquered these people because they're the first one. They're not organized. They're not ready for war. And they curse some of these people, and these people will become the Accursed, the characters that you play. So each witch curse people and give them a witch mark on them that sort of brand them into servitors of those witches. And each have a different theme. So you've got the Grand Coven versus the Armies of Light, which is the resistance led by people from Valkenholm, I think, the king over there. So what happens is that the war goes on. People are slaughtered. They're no match for the Grand Coven. Let's put it this way. But what the Armies of Light do is they make an alliance with the Fae, Seelie Fae, which are the good Fae people, and that leads to an ambush on the Jinn. The Jinn is one of the witches, and during that ambush, many leaders die from, especially the Armies of Light, but they manage to kill. Is she really dead? But the Jinn is destroyed, defeated, and presumed dead since then. So when that happens, the Grand Coven, a lot of the witches decide, this war is boring, or maybe we don't want to die. Let's just go back. So they retreat, they leave. Most of them just go back to where they came from. But because they conquered the whole world, some of them stay behind to rule the world. So you're left when the campaign begins, basically on the timeline, you live in a conquered world. Puppet states, puppet rulers, and that kind of thing. So you've got Karnkainen, and remember I said it will remind you of the real world. Well, this is really strongly Celtic-inspired real country. You've got clans, bards are a big thing there. People like them, and this is, to me, the part that really captured me. I mean, I had read the book years ago, but I didn't remember a whole lot. But you get to learn how one of the witches, the Morrigan, she's basically like a necromancer. Reminds me if you've seen the movie Maleficent. She's kind of like that. Okay, and it explained how she charmed the leader of that country, the clan leader, the big boss, and got him to kill everybody in his family, and then she just took over, and she allowed people to remain there, to live there, but obviously she controls what's going on. And that to me, that part that really captured me. But when you go on to the other realms in there, I didn't get that same punch with what happened to their countries. You got Hebron, which is a lot like Israel, because there are kibbutz in there. So that's how you recognize, okay, I'm in Israel right now. So proud people, hard workers, and they relied on their armies a bit too much. So they got kind of destroyed there too, but they're still there. Then you got Euphrates, which is like Egypt, because you've got pyramids, you've got desert. It used to be a rich farmland, but now it's been reduced to deserts, and you got mummies and pharaohs leading the people. Then you got Menria, which is like a mix of Italy and Spain. So you've got real artistic, industrious people. They were kind of far away from where the witches came from, so their countries did not get as destroyed by war as the others. Instead, their contribution was to send engineers and their weapons, their good weapons and inventions over there to the armies and send troops. So because of that, the other realms kind of don't like Manria because they say, well, you guys didn't do anything during the Bane War, which isn't true, but that's the sentiment anyway. Then you got Stepangrad. It's basically Russia. You even have banyas in there, the steam houses, bathhouses, and these people, yeah, they suffered quite a bit. And then the last one is Valkenholm. This is Germany, Transylvania. You get strong Ravenloft vibes from that place.
So you mentioned there's two questions I want to ask. So for example, in this game you play as monsters, right? So I'm sure we'll get into this later, but you could visit Stepangrad, the Russia type place, and go to one of these bathhouses. So you could, for example, have a scene with a mummy, a werewolf, having a little bath together.
Yep, with the branches and beating each other with the branches, and then jumping in ice cold water.
Sold.
Yeah.
Second of all, you said that basically, other than one of the first places, Kainen, that these like kind of countries didn't necessarily grab you. Like the history wasn't as interesting as the first place.
Yeah.
Why is that? What are they just not that interesting to you, or is it that they're not as well written?
No, they're just as interesting. I think it's just that in every realm part, they go on to explain how they were affected by the Bane War.
Okay.
And the one on Kainen to me is the most interesting because you actually get details on how the Morrigan just took over the whole place. It's really, really well written, and you get strong mental images of what actually happened, and it reminds me of the stories like the Maleficent and that type of thing, where I don't know, the other ones, I guess Euphrates was kind of interesting too, because what happened basically is they were being invaded, and then the pharaoh or whatever, he went to the djinn, and what she does is, you have a wish, you make a wish, and she makes it happen. And his wish was to bring back the glory of the old days, basically. But the djinn is also a trickster. She'll twist your wish to make it so that you regret it. So what she did, instead of just making the country great and powerful again, she brought back all the dead people, the dead rulers, and now mummies. And the mummies became her accursed, her shock troops, the elite legion of the djinn. So that's kind of interesting too, but it's just not the same punch to me as Kainen.
Yeah, because I suppose one of the sort of draws to this world is that you have an interesting, I guess the best way to put it would be like a political climate to role play in, because there's going to be, each one of these areas has something that's going to affect the way people feel in those areas, and it's going to be fun interacting with NPCs in those areas, And if they have an interesting feel to them, that's what's going to be fun for players to be in those areas. But yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah, and I mean, some people might think, well, it just copy of the real world, and it's not really creative, but I don't see that as a bad thing at all, because when you role play in a new setting, especially from the player's side of things, you need reference points. When the GM's trying to describe a country or a feel, a certain vibe that you get from that, and to just say, think, you're visiting Valkenholm, think Germany, the Black Wood, the Black Forest, and Transylvania. Just by saying that, instantly the players have a good idea of what it looks like to be there.
Yeah, and even if you're not creative, you can just say that and then get out of the way, rather than having to describe everything and go, hey, this place is like Germany, right, let's go on with the gaming, and that's fun.
Yep. All right, so yeah, chapter 2 now, the Accursed. That's where we find out a bit more about them. Basically, like I mentioned before, the Accursed are the shock troops of the witches. But now the witches are gone, or most of them anyway. The war is over. The Accursed have no purpose in the world. Basically, they used to be from the Outlands or maybe other countries. They were cursed. The witches don't need them anymore, and of course, their own people, their own families don't want them anymore. They're monsters. They killed a lot of people. They were responsible for so many war crimes and atrocities. But they're there. They have to fit in somewhere. Leaderless and unwanted, they are welcomed by the Order of the Penitent. You got one religion in Morden. It's called the Enochian faith. Basically, just one God, and it's a lot like Christianity. I think that's the feel I get. So what the Order of the Penitent does is they say, all right, you've done some bad things, but we can give you a second chance. Join us. We've got donuts. We've got milk. And then you can repair some of the bad things that you've done in the world.
I tell you what, though, a vampire has no real need for a donut, so it'd have to be one of those filled donuts, but instead of jam or jelly, it's blood.
Blood, yeah.
And they can just suck donut. So that means you join this order of the donut dudes, and then and you've got to then go out and do good stuff. But are there people in the world that don't necessarily believe that you can turn good, and they'll try and hunt you down?
Exactly. I mean, you're stuck where nobody wants you, really. Nobody wants you there. You're totally unwanted, but the Order of the Penitent believes in you. They're basically the only people that believes in you. And meanwhile, you've got the witches, well, those that are still there anyway, or their agents, the Banes, that will probably try to lure you back. Maybe one of the witches decides that her work isn't totally done, so she needs you to do this mission, and now you're torn. And there are still accursed out there that are still serve the witches. You're just one of the people that doesn't feel like going to war anymore.
But you mentioned that the witches are gone now, right?
Most of them are gone. Some of them are still there and ruling, but most of them have departed, yeah.
As interesting as the lore stuff is, right, and it is, let's do a quick checklist. What are the monsters that you can be? I want to know. I'm interested, because this is one of the things that I think a lot of listeners are going to want to know, because, I mean, I've always wanted to be a mummy. I mean, obviously White Wolf did that game Mummy back in the day, but that was kind of crap. Can you be a mummy? And
yes, you can.
Do you have the weakness of being unraveled?
Yeah, all that. Yes. So, when you think fantasy, you think elves, goblins, dwarves, whatever. Boring. Don't need that. Everybody, well, first of all, in Morden are human. But now you play a monster. So you've got the Dampier, so half vampires, and you're your witch is the Blood Witch. That's her name. And then I mentioned the witch marks. Those are basically a sigil that identifies you as one of the accursed, and it identifies you as one of the witches. So each one, it looks different. Like for the Dhampir, they're tattoos. They look like tattoos. That's what your witch mark looks like. Then you've got the golems. So constructs can be a scarecrow type of guy, or you can be a Frankenstein monster guy, or iron golem, whatever. And those, well, they get their witch mark looks like a carving, which is cool. And then the crone is your witch. She's kind of the leader of the Grand Coven, and she was the first one to just say, I've had it with this place, I'm going back. So they're kind of leaderless. Okay.
Yeah.
So far, so good?
So far, so good. Okay, so far, right, I'm just... the thing is, right, so I'm just trying to think, right? So you could have a scarecrow, right? And an iron golem, so Tin Man, right? Carry on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See where I'm going with this?
Yeah. Yeah, with the witch especially, huh? The wicked witch, yeah. Then you got the mongrels, and so these guys, obviously, they're Australian.
I think that might be offensive.
They're not all of them are pure. All right, inside joke. Mongrels are actually they're a mix of different animals, because your witch, the chimera, she's like a scientist. She likes to experiment on people. So you, as a mongrel, you could have the body of a horse, and then the upper body of an octopus, if you wanted to, or the lower body of a monkey and the upper body of an eagle, whatever. That's what she does.
The upper body of a lion, lower body of a lion, but the mind of a baby.
Okay. Maybe not. No,
well,
that doesn't make sense. But
I'm just throwing out ideas here, man. Why you always got to shoot me down? I'm trying to be creative. Okay, well, how about this? No, shut up. Right, so you got okay, so it's the body of a spider, but the mind of a baby.
Baby spiders.
All right, carry on. What's next?
And yeah, with the mongrels, your witch mark looks like it's stitched together, sewn together. Yeah.
So wouldn't
basically, because
the thing is, wouldn't that go for all mongrels? Like, so all of these have like a witch mark, right? But like, surely all chimeras would look like they were stitched together in some way. So wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
So actually, that's quite an advantage of playing that class, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, it's just how your witch mark looks like. And by the way, you can't remove it if you. I mean, you could burn it. You could actually cut it off of you, and the stronger you get, the larger this witch marks gets. But it'll always come back, so you can't get rid of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Now you mentioned the mummies, and yeah, you can play a mummy, and the leader is the Jinn, and as mentioned before, she's presumed dead right now, so nobody knows what happened to her, but she was defeated during that ambush, the grand betrayal, and those. Go ahead.
No, you mentioned that like a lot of these things, so like. The vampires, the golems, the mongrels. You can be loads of different forms of them. With the mummies, do these take different forms, or do they all have to be like a bunch of towels?
Yeah, they have to be wrapped. Because their wrappings is their armor. Also, it serves as an armor. So.
Okey-dokey.
Yeah, you look like a real mummy. You don't have to have your whole face covered. Looking at the illustrations, most of them, well, all of them don't have one. They just look basically like a pharaoh type of mummy, like a grand mummy, not royal mummy, not like a low life shambling mummy. Okay.
Sweet.
And their witch mark is a cartouche.
Sounds delicious.
I had to look up what that means, because in French, cartouche means cartridge, but apparently cartouche means it's like a tablet with carvings on it.
They've got like an iPad.
Yeah, basically. They carry that around, and that's their witch mark. Then you got the Ophidians. Like I said, the snake people. They're good spies. They're quick. They can secrete venom, and they're led by the Gorgon, so like a Medusa type of witch. And she acts. She doesn't claim any part of the world, but she's more like a spy, basically. And your witch mark is scale patterns that are even more easily seen when you shed your skin, because you can do that too.
Well, the good thing about that is if anybody sees you, right, and they go, "You're a snake people," then you just shed your skin, and people, they'll identify you. But the thing is, as you're running away, you shed your skin, they trip over it, you're away. Agility trick.
Yep. There you go. Then you got the revenants. So they're basically zombies, living dead. They're pretty cool. It reminds me of the Harrowed in Deadlands. Basically, they're not like mindless, shuffling, shambling zombie. They're quite smart, and they're led by the Morrigan.
Yes.
So like I said, the necromancer one.
That's
and
cool.
their witch mark is scar tissue. Again, all of them have a different look, which I love. Then you got the shades, your ghost, so you can phase in and out of, go through walls, that type of thing, right?
Surely that must be cheating, though, right? You're a ghost, nothing can hit you.
But you can't hit anything back either.
So what's the point? Look, that's rubbish, man. You just go, look, okay, day one.
No, you're not like that all the time.
Okay. So you're like half ghost. You got ghost dad, but you've got like a regular mum.
Yeah, I mean you can affect the physical world in a limited fashion, and you can phasing, and you're led by the Dark Queen, and that witch mark is pretty cool. Okay, your witch mark is actually an absence of anything. So you're a ghost, right? Your witch mark looks like you can just see through it. So there's nothing there. That's where your witch mark is.
So what, your whole body, or just a part of your body is transparent?
Just the part where your witch mark is. When you first start, it's maybe, the size of a football. And then it grows to almost your whole body. So, at some point, part of your body, you can't even see it, but you can see a distinct pattern in there, and that's where your witch mark is.
I like that. It'd be really cool for role-playing as well, having to cope with becoming invisible.
Yeah, invisible man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Having
well, you could
to
wrap
wear clothes and stuff.
yourself up in bandages, and then just pretend you're a mummy.
Mummy ghost. Half mummy, half ghost. Yeah, that'd be cool. And finally, you got the Vargar. And so these are the werewolves. Our dear friend Sean Richer asked about any stats for werewolves. You got a racial profile there, racial abilities for the werewolf. And I like him quite a lot. And the leader, the witch, is Baba Yaga, which is quite known in mythology and all that, especially in Russia. And your witch mark is a birthmark, and it looks like a stain. And of course, if you're a werewolf, you're quite hairy, right? You got your body's covered with fur, but the part where your witch mark is totally bare, so you can't hide it. It will still show, still be visible. So those are the 8 type of Accursed that you can play. And then, of course, character creation, it's pretty standard with the usual Savage Worlds. There's nothing really different there, except the skills. You've got athletics, which is combined swimming and climbing, and then subterfuge, which combines stealth and lockpicking, I believe.
Oh, that's quite strange.
And then, yeah, and we just talked about that not long ago on the show for the way in Savage Worlds Black they're going to do it.
Yeah, we won't get into that again.
No. And then you get a bunch of racial edges. So these are ways to make your Accursed even more pronounced. Different rages for the werewolves, while the Vargar and all that. You get, I think, 2 or 3 for each of them that you can take. Then the setting rules. I will say this first because, people that know me know that I'm pretty particular about setting rules. I'm really picky, especially after the Goon. But they tell you in a sidebar that the setting rules are options, not restrictions. So that means you don't need to use them at all. Basically, from the horror companion, you've got chronological phenomena, rituals, and signs important. And that's what I meant earlier when I said that, sure, it's required, but if you don't, you just won't be using those 3 setting rules, which I don't think is going to hurt anything, but it sure brings a lot of the flavor to the setting, I think.
Is this the only time, then, that the horror companion is used?
No, there's one more time that I'm going to mention later.
And these setting rules, are they... what do they do? Because I've never heard of these before. I don't have the horror companion because I'm cheap.
Well, chronological phenomena, basically, all Hallows Eve, certain dates in the calendar are supposed to be ominous to certain things that might happen. So basically, when it's a certain date, people of the Accursed of one witch line are more potent to do certain things. Okay, in the companion you get some suggestions, but for this one they made particular ones for each of the witch lines. Rituals, it's basically a way to cast a spell. That it's a dramatic task, but by doing this ritual, you can increase the potency of a spell, have it reach longer range, longer distances, make it last longer, that type of thing. And then if you fail the dramatic task, something bad happens. So that's the gist of it. And signs important. We used it a little bit when we played our Savage Warhammer. It's like divination, palm reading, that type of thing, where you go to a reading, maybe to a gypsy, and she tells you your future, and depending on how well she rolls or you roll, I don't remember which one, you can get bonus bennies or that type of thing. It just adds to the flavor.
Sounds good.
And then you've got maybe about 10 of them. If you've played Shintar, you'll recognize some of them. And this is where, to me, setting rules should be something that highlights the setting, that makes it feel more like you're in the setting. And these are setting rules to me that feel more like house rules, like the writers felt that they like to play with these rules better, so they put them in there. And I don't think they bring anything to the setting to make it feel more like Accursed. But like I said, they say options, not restrictions. So if you don't want to use these, just don't use them. And
I think more books
that's cool.
should say that, you know?
Yeah, or maybe it should be a given. I don't know. But sometimes you don't know that if you're going to remove something, it's going to affect something else, like edges or hindrances. And
yeah, exactly. Now that's why a lot of people don't do it, I guess. But I mean, maybe more books should make an effort to make them optional.
Yep, I like that part.
I think.
And then you got edges and hindrances. Just one hindrance here that I think is really cool. It's called Unwitting Tool. Basically, a more powerful accursed of your witch line can observe through your senses. So you've got this spy, this person that's always in your head that can see what you see, can hear what you hear, and it's got to make you paranoid, right? And maybe the rest of your team doesn't want you to see certain things. So I think that's a pretty cool hindrance.
I think that'd be awesome, and especially if you maybe don't even tell the team, but the GM knows.
Yeah. So, you hide something somewhere and nobody but you knows where it is, or your team, and then you go back to get it and it's gone because that person that's watching over you sent their cronies after you,
Yeah, and suddenly all the team's wondering why people keep turning up, keep finding you, and you're just keeping quiet. Yeah. You're like, I don't even know, man. It's beyond me. And the GMs and you are just like looking at each other like, I don't know. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Exactly.
What an awesome hindrance.
Yep. And for edges, well, there's a bunch of them in there. I'm not gonna, go over all of them, but you got professional ones like to be a knight of a certain order. Some of them, of course, to make you better fighter, that type of thing. I just want to say you've got only 2 arcane backgrounds in this setting, so it is what I would call a low magic setting, low fantasy setting. You've got alchemy. So it's more science than magic, actually. They discovered some things, and you make potions, that type of thing. And then witchcraft. So you're one of the good witches. And yeah, you'd expect, spells like curses and that type of thing. That's basically what it is. Which leads us to the next chapter 3 on unholy power. So yeah, you got 17 new spells in there, and this is where the last place where you're actually going to need the horror companion, because each of those 2 arcane backgrounds have their own spell lists or formulas for alchemy, and some of these powers are from the companion. So if you don't have the companion, you're going to have a shorter spell list, basically. You're still going to have quite a bit of powers, spells in there, but you're not going to get all of them. Do you think that kills the deal for you there, or?
Honestly, yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I'm switching off for the rest of this review. That is a joke. But do you know what? Yeah, a little bit, because I'm really sold on this setting. I love the backstory, and being from, I know we got a little bit to go yet, but being from like I've played like a bit of the White Wolf stuff and absolutely loving it. This to me seems like an all-in-one package. You don't have to buy Werewolf. You don't have to buy Vampire 2 to play all the different things. And it's kind of that kind of flavour. But the thing about it is that, except it's fantasy, but the thing about it is that now I have to buy 2 books because I don't have the horror companion. Do you know what I mean? And yes, you would have a shorter spell list and could still play it. But for me, I'd always feel like I'm not playing the full thing. Do you know what I mean? And that kind
Yeah.
of it would always be just biting at the back of my neck, and I'd just be like, God damn it. So yeah, I'd have to get the horror companion, and then I'm not exactly Mr. Captain Moneybags over here.
Captain Moneybags.
So if any listeners listening, they got a spare horror companion lying around, hit me up. Yes, I'm going to use this show to beg.
Yeah. Oh, and I know what I wanted to mention earlier in the show. So, because you mentioned Moneybags here. So I got in touch with John Dunn, the guy who produced Accursed, and yeah, he asked me, so do you need anything from me for the review? And I thought about it. I'm like, no, not really. I know some people were wondering if John would be on the show, but because it's a review, I'd feel kind of silly reviewing sitting while he's just sitting there, so maybe some other time. But anyway, so I told him, how about a sale? So John immediately said, yeah, I'll run a sale. So if you're listening to this, starting on Monday this week, so Monday, what day would that be? That would be the 23rd, right? There will be a week-long sale where the whole Accursed line will be 20% off.
What a guy, man.
What a guy, right? Yeah. So yeah, if you like it, keep listening, and everybody gets that rebate. No code necessary. He's going to run the sale on DriveThruRpg. You can get everything there for 20% off. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. You the man.
So yeah, just two of the new spells here that I think were interesting for alchemy. One is called Transmute Weapon, and this is a novice power, so you can get that right from the get-go. What it does is your weapon becomes a bane to your target, because all the Accursed and their banes, their monsters from each witch line is weak to something or vulnerable to some type of element. It could be quicksilver, fire, that type of thing, right? And so your weapon becomes a bane against. It could be just a normal sword, but all of a sudden it's shrouded in flames, and it'll deal more damage against that bane from the witch line or the Accursed, or it will turn to quicksilver, or whatever you can think of. And what's even more cool about it is that it lasts 1 minute per rank, I think, or something like that. But every round, you can change what your weapon looks like. So let's say you're fighting a bunch of different creatures from different witch lines. One round, it's shrouded in flames. The next one, it's made out of blackbriar wood against vampires. And then it keeps changing its appearance like that. So I really love that power.
They're really going for the kind of Full Metal Alchemist type alchemy here. I know that a lot of anime fans are going to be well into that. So any anime fans listening, pick this up.
I've never watched it, so I'll take your word for it.
Basically, it's a bunch of anime dudes changing their weapons constantly and whacking each other. So if you're into that,
there you go. Yep, that's basically what that power does. And then for witchcraft, well, like I mentioned, you've got curse power, you've got the illusion power, right? A lot of people are like, where's the illusion power in Savage Worlds? Well, now you got one. But one of the powers is transmography. What you do is the curse puts someone's mind and soul into a small living animal. And that's permanent. That's a higher level power, but it's permanent.
Oh my god!
So let's say you're trying to defeat a creature that just so hard to kill it. Just put it in a rabbit and stomp the rabbit, and you've defeated the creature.
So you're telling me You're telling me that you could just grab an enemy that you don't like, whack him in a beetle, stomp on the beetle.
Yep, basically that's what it does. I mean, there's an opposed roll there, obviously, so it might not work, but you've got that option.
Yeah, but nonetheless, you try and use that on a boss monster, you're going to get the GM's going to be using up all of that boss monster's bennies. Try not to
I would.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want it going in the beetle. So, if you're playing this game, tip number 1, carry a box of beetles with you at all times.
Yep, that might come handy.
Well, it totally is. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
otherwise you're going to say to the GM, are there any small animals about? And the GM's going to say no. So carry something.
Right. Yeah, carry a chicken coop with you or something like that. You've got goats, you've got marmots and
Yeah.
all, just in case. Or you just keep all the villains in there. You travel with them. They're all in cages.
yeah, exactly. And then you just jab them with a sharp stick from time to time to teach them.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Chapter 4, Tools and Gear. The biggest thing here is it uses something called the resource die. Instead of everything having a price, you've got a die type from D4 to D10. Every rank you go up, your resource die goes up. Every item as a value and availability modifiers that's added to your die roll. So let's say you got D4, you're trying to buy something that's -4 value, -4 availability, you roll at D4 -8. And if you roll a 4, that's a success. You manage to have enough money to buy it.
I hate that.
I'm all for less bookkeeping and all that, but I've never used it. Yeah, I've never used it mainly because it seems inconsistent where, one roll you might be able to afford a castle because you aced on your die, and then the next round you can't afford to buy, a loaf of bread because you rolled really low. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's senseless. It's a nice way to speed things up. I think it'd be nice to use it sometimes just to speed up. Let's say, for instance, you just want to abstract out a long shopping trip. Let's say you go shopping for a day and you want to buy enough food to last you a few weeks. You just roll that. But if you're just buying something, let's say you want to go buy a gun, I hate that. I think it's rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, other systems use it, and like I said, I've never used it. I like the idea because less bookkeeping, but I've never used it exactly for the reason we just mentioned. So, but you've got black powder in this fantasy setting, and all kinds of inventions like something called NAFTA, which is basically napalm. So you could buy napalm in this game and lay waste to forests and stuff.
Well,
and people.
I've seen there's another one on there that on your notes that you're not pronouncing. What's that one? The one above that?
Nicoric gun.
Yeah. Oh.
This is what. Yeah, that's a new gun. There's quite a few new guns. This one, I just picked this one, but there's like 3 or 4 other ones that are just as badass as this one. This gun is 7 carbine barrels strapped together, and when you shoot it, it's in a burst template. And so everybody rolls agility to get out of the way, or they get hit with 2d8 plus 2 damage, which is pretty badass. There's another one with even more barrels, and when you fire it, I think even a Nicoria gun, if you roll a 1 on your die, your shooting die, you're gonna dislocate a shoulder or something like that. That's just how powerful it is. The other one will send you back. You've got to kind of anchor yourself to fire it because it's just too powerful. You've got something like a Gatling gun in there, a volley gun or whatever it is. There's quite a few in there. You got artillery also. But as any black powder weapon, they take a little bit to reload, so it's only limited. It might sound powerful like that, but and when it takes you 2-3 rounds to reload a weapon, you're probably only going to use it the first round and then move on to something else.
Still right? Cool though.
Yeah, still cool. And then you've got a bunch of kind of artifacts. I wouldn't call them like real powerful magical weapons or items because it's a low magic setting, but you got something like a spirit lantern. It's basically detect arcana, the power, but to detect spirits. Then you got inventions like the balloon, electric fluid. It's electricity, printing press, Palmyrian steel, which gives you +3 to the armor-piercing value of your weapon, but it costs quite a bit. Blackbriar wood, it's +4 damage versus Dampier because it's a wood that's as strong as iron, and it's a bane against the Dampiers. So you've got quite a bit in there. You got the usual loadout of swords and axes and all that. You got rules for whip, something that you don't get in every fantasy setting. Steel whip or just a leather whip, and how to use it. And like I said, black powder weapons, artillery, that type of thing. You've got quite a bit.
This is awesome, man.
Chapter 5, the witch marks. So this is one really cool part. I've already mentioned the appearance, which is called the stigmata of every witch mark. But you also get special abilities that unlock while your witch mark unlocks certain abilities as you go up in ranks. So, for instance, at novice rank, every and this goes for every accursed, you get an ability called Witch Breed Sense. So you can make a notice check to detect a bane or accursed of your witch line. So you get some type of radar ability, right? And then drawn to those in need. This is like a plot device type of ability where your accursed can sense that you are needed somewhere. So it's basically a way for the GM to steer you where he wants you to go.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do something like that in Solomon Kane as well, but it's a nice thing to do, even if it's just offering the player a choice. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, hey, you have to go here, but it can be like, you sense these 3 locations that somebody needs you, or something like this. It can actually be fun because the player can kind of actually feel like he has the upper hand on other players because he has information that they don't have. So to an extent, it is a GM tool, but it's also something that makes the player feel cool. So it's actually more than that, I think. More than just
special snowflakes.
Yeah, kind of. It's kind of for the special snowflakes. You make the player feel superior to the other guys because he's like, I'm the one with the information, so maybe we should do what I think.
Yeah, the GM told me so it must be important.
It's like those guys that have read the Game of Thrones books and thinks they're better than the guy that have just watched the series.
Yeah, book's always better. Then here comes the really cool part. This might as well be a setting rule because, again, they tell you if you feel this is too clumsy, too clunky for you, you can just, toss it aside and not use it. But, wow, what a treat. I mean, I've already mentioned I think Savage Rules does great with action, with combat and all that. But when it comes to narrative type of mechanics for the game, it is lacking on purpose, I think, because it's kind of an old school type of game where the GM can do whatever he wants, and that works great for me. But there's something called acceptance or defiance in Accursed. So you're a monster. Here's your moral dilemma when you play, and these mechanics help enforce that. Are you going to embrace your monster side, Or do you wish deep down that you could become human again, that you despise yourself for who you are? So there are guidelines for the GM to recognize what the player wants to do through their actions. So depending on how they role play their characters, they're going to lean either towards acceptance of their witch mark and their nature, or defiance of their nature. You've got 3 steps. It's like, imagine you're in the middle, and then you can go to the left or to the right. You've got 3 steps each way. The first 2 steps are dictated by the GM. The GM decides, all right, you've done enough things to indicate, to tell me that you're trying to accept that you're a monster. And what this does is, let's say you're a shade, you're a ghost, okay? And you've reached step 2 of acceptance. Now your phasing ability improves to 5 rounds. So for 5 rounds at a time, you can phase. I'd have to check what the base of it is, but I think it's 3 rounds usually. So you think of it as, when you accept your witch mark, your powers, your abilities become more pronounced, but also your weaknesses become more pronounced. So now you'll be more affected by salt and that type of thing, right? And when you defy it, your abilities as an accursed diminish, but also your vulnerabilities will diminish. So you essentially become more human. So for the Vargr, the werewolf, at step 1 of defiance, his natural weapons go from a D6 plus strength damage to a D4 plus strength damage. So basically your claws shrink, they're not as sharp, and they deal less damage. But your weakness to the hunger, when you go totally berserk, they're not as pronounced, because now you suffer no penalty to your vigor test to resist it. So you've essentially became less of a werewolf, and you're less vulnerable to it.
I like that. So you've got an actual mechanical benefit to role playing.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Basically what it is. Something that's lacking. Every of the accursed as all of these abilities for each steps, right? Until you become fully one way or another. And this is where, they leave it to the GM as to what totally happens, because I think it's Jason Sunday asked a question, if you could become a full vampire. Well, maybe the GM decides that, that's what happens to you when you fully accept your role as a Dhampir. Now you're full-blooded vampires. You can no longer blend in with normal people. You just become a total monster, right? And the third step, this is where the player has to take that step. The GM can't say that you've crossed over to the final step. The player has to make a conscious decision, and you do that by taking an edge called chosen fate or something like that. That's how you become fully one way. And then they give you a bunch of guidelines too, that once you go down one road, you're not able to go back and go a different road. But they also tell you, you're the GM, if you think it makes sense and it would be cool for your story, go ahead. I mean, I don't see what the big deal would be in doing that, allowing that. If the player through role play, that decides that, okay, at first I wanted to be a monster, but I realized that I was wrong. Now I don't want to be a monster anymore. Let's go all the way back to defiance. So this is a really cool mechanic. It's pretty easy to do, and of course it will give you more powers, and for the player, he has to keep track of a couple more things, but I don't think it's really cumbersome. personally, I'd want to use it if I played it because I think it's really cool. And maybe I'll mention later too that you could use that setting rule in other games too. Then you've got the anatomy of a witch mark. So your witch mark not only tells you which line you're from, but what kind of person you are. There's going to be certain symbols on it, like for a revenant, there's a new moon symbol that represents that you're like a stealthy type of guy. Then you have the skull that identifies you as one of the revenants, so the Morgan symbol. You've got the book. That means that you like knowledge is important to you. Then you got the Triskelion. Basically, this is a symbol common to Carnkynan, the Highlands. So that means you come from there. And then the Kynan knot, which is a symbol of defiance between the clans in Carnkynan. But in this case, it signifies that you oppose the Morrigan. So just maybe a notice roll or a smart roll when you meet an Accursed will reveal all these details about the Accursed, which I think is pretty cool. So far, so good. All right. Chapter 6, The Witches. The Bitchin' Witches. So each of them has an entry. And when you get their bio, what they're about, their goals, the kind of magic they use. And what's interesting is no stats. There are no stats for the witches. They're, like people say, if it has stats, you can kill it. So basically, you can't just run up to a witch and with a lucky die roll just defeat them. It's going to be, it's up to the GM, but it could be a certain ritual. Like with liches, it could be finding their organs or, whatever you can think of that's left to the GM to do. And I mean, I've already explained which of the witches and their accursed. So the ones that are still left there, you've got Baba Yaga in Steppengrad. You've got the Blood Witch in Valkenholm. The Chimera has a fortress called Turris Ultra, and this tower just teleports itself all over the place. The GM basically decides, it could be the players are just walking, going somewhere, and they wake up and poof, there's Tower of the Chimera in there where experiments, and maybe you're abducted and you end up in the dungeons of that fortress and that type of thing. So it can happen wherever you want.
What if you just if it just appears and you're in the tennis court and suddenly the Chimera challenges you to a game of deadly tennis?
Better take it. That might be the only way to defeat her, right? And then, the crone, she went back. The Dark Queen, because of salt water, she couldn't really get far into the land. So she's kind of, I think in those mountains, she's got a fortress herself there, and that's where she's at. The Jinn, presumed dead, and again, later, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the plot point campaign in there deals with finding out what happened to the Jinn, basically. The Gorgon, she hasn't laid claim to any places. She's kind of the spy one, right? And of course, the Morrigan is in Carnkynan. She's built this place called the Blackroot Wood, and she's slowly turning this place into maybe a place from another dimension. Basically, she's morphing the landscape and making it a nice place for her to live in. I mean, you have to read it really to know each of them real well, but just by their theme, I think you get a good idea of what they're about. They each have their own goals that basically you've got 8 villains that you can use as a campaign arc. Or you can have 2 or 3 of them, or even all of them if you want a really long campaign, but all of them could be in there.
Are there any details about how they feel about each other in there?
Yeah, some of them have are affinities with others. Some of them don't like each other, and you get that in there.
So I mean, this brings us on to the next bit as well, because I was going to say one of the things that you could do as an adventure hook is have maybe one of the ones that's still around hire you guys and ask you to go and goof up the other one's business, and just be like,
that's basically what happens in the plot point campaign. Spoiler alert. But so I've named 8 of the witches, but they are 13. What that means is that 5 of them, who are they? We don't know. That's up to you, the GM, really. If you want to introduce your own witch line in there, you can. You've got 5 of them that you can play with there. They could even be the focal point of the whole campaign of discovering more about a new witch line. Well, and it's not really new, but maybe it's less known. So you've got power there as a GM. So yeah, chapter 7, the final chapter, Adventures in Morton. They give you a bunch of hooks, and I'm just going to read a short paragraph here that really spoke to me. It's nothing special really, but it's just how I like my RPG books. All right. Even the most seasoned game masters sometimes need a basis for an adventure. That's far more likely to happen when exploring a new setting. This section presents a variety of different starting points for game master who wish to create their own adventures, but are uncertain about the best starting point. The different ideas can each be explored in a variety of ways while remaining true to the core elements of the Accursed setting. Yes. You start with a new setting, you don't really know what it's about, and to me, pre-gens and adventures is where you get, as a GM, I get to understand what you do in this setting, what it's about. And it's so refreshing that, sometimes you read RPG books and you wonder if these people actually play RPGs, because it's well written, but it doesn't speak to me as a gamer. And this book, throughout with sidebars and all that, it speaks to you like that the whole time.
It's one of the big mistakes that not even like a lot of Savage Worlds books, but like a lot of RPGs make all the time. Even D&D, for Christ's sake. When I first started reading that, I had no idea how to do a decent adventure other than go through the dungeon, encounter boss, not really even having a good story to it. And I like this type of stuff, because if you pick up, like it says here, a new setting, sometimes you don't know the best way to do an adventure in that setting. You may know a good way that you're just recycling from another setting, but then you pick up a new setting and it'll be like, oh cool, there's this new way of doing adventures that I didn't even know, because this setting is so wildly different to anything I've played before. And having these little hints in here is always such a welcome thing, isn't it? So yeah.
Yep, I love it. Jason Sunday had a question. Part of his question, he asked if you can play human characters in this game. And the answer is yes. The simple reason being that when you look at the racial profiles for every Accursed, they're all balanced as a +2, just like any other races. So while they have really powerful abilities and cool abilities, they also have weaknesses. So they're all balanced. So to insert a human character in there works great because they won't be, less powerful than the witch marks. They just won't have the same vulnerabilities and all that. Now, would I run a campaign with a full cast of characters? I could, but I don't think you would get the whole flavor of the being a monster in the world that doesn't want you. It'd be a different feel. Maybe monster hunters, but it'd be a different campaign. It wouldn't really be the standard Accursed campaign.
But what you could have is a party of all monsters except for one, and have maybe a player that's read the book be a guy from the Order of the Penitent that was sent along to keep an eye on them, or something like this.
Yeah, could be that. Could be someone from their family from before they were, they became accursed.
Yeah, so it's a werewolf, and then their cousin Steve.
Yep, or enamored, woman or man. You got a Dampier in there, and she's in love with the Dampier, that type of thing. I think maybe one or two at the most in the party would. I think it would bring something really interesting to the setting, but to have a full party of human, I'd say, no, I don't think you'd get the full flavor of a Accursed.
I think it would ruin it, but from a mechanical standpoint, it might actually be handy to have one human in the party, simply just for maybe if you just walk into a new town. Just having a guy that can just walk into normal shops and just do stuff normally might be handy, because when you go to the bar and you just want to grab a few ales, it might be nice just to have a human walk in there first and go, hey, the party's gonna walk in, but nobody be shocked, they look a bit weird.
Maybe their announcer or something. He just walks in first and he announces them like a bard, maybe something like that. That'd be cool. And then the the plot point campaign. Wow. It's called the New Compact. And John was curious to hear what I think of it. Well, what I think of it is that if you're expecting a plot point campaign like 50 Fathoms or The Flood, something that you can just pick up and play right away, you're going to be disappointed with this plot point campaign. But it is a true plot point campaign. What I mean by that is that, it's 7 acts, so you've got seven parts to the plot point campaign, and depending on what happens during your adventures, it could end in Act 5. But so you've got a starting point, and it's with the Order of the Penitent and all that. And I'm not gonna spoil it, but it is a real plot point campaign because at the beginning of each act, you've got kind of a trigger. What I mean by that is when you read it, it'll say, well, when the characters reach this destination, or when they meet this character, now this plot point happens. This is a true plot point campaign to me, and because you've got time in between those acts to do your own things. Mainly, it's traveling. You go from one part of the Morden to another one. So there's a lot that can happen in between those two acts. Pet peeve of mine. I see that in a lot of adventures, and sometimes from really veteran writers, and it really irks me. But all right, in the New Compact, Act 2, there's a part where you're exploring kind of ruins, and you're supposed to find a bottle, like a vial of something. And this is the most important thing about this plot point campaign. If you don't find this, nothing happens after that. Okay, maybe someone could find it for you and then give it to you, and then you could get back to the plot point campaign. But it revolves around that item, that artifacts. It's so important, but yet in that plot point, they say the player characters roll a notice check, and if they succeed, they find it. Okay, so if it's that important, why does it hinge on a die roll? That irks me to no end. If it's that information, that thing is necessary to keep going, don't have anybody roll. Because what if all of them fail and none of them want to spend a penny to re-roll? What do you do?
Yeah, we always say to players, don't, like, even when I'm GMing sometimes, I go, I say to players, really? You're going to spend a penny on a notice roll? Come on, man, don't worry about that. It's just that you're going to see anything that's out in the open anyway. But it's like, if you're investigating something, I mean, yeah, that's, most players wouldn't spend a penny on a notice roll. They'll save it for combat. They'll save it for soak rolls. Like, yeah, I mean, the thing is, if it's absolutely plot critical, it should be maybe something that's out in the open, or the players walk in and you see the item sticking out of the drawer, or something like this, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
Christ. Yeah, or
I mean,
it should say it should maybe have a backup where it says if the players don't notice it, then this NPC points it out, or something like this.
Right, and I mean, if you're a veteran GM, you know how to get around this. It's you're smart enough, you can do that. But imagine this is your first ever RPG, and you've never GM'd before, and you're gonna be really confused if everybody fails that roll. You like, okay, guys, I don't know what to do now. But yeah, like I said, it's a pet peeve. It's not a big deal because there are ways around it. It just irks me every time I see that in design.
Well, it's like you said, I've been GMing for years, and I have plot critical items hinge on notice rolls all the time. But like you say, I have ways of getting around it. But not everyone has been GMing for years. So I bet you there's loads of people that have played that and just gone, well, campaign over. Yeah,
basically.
All the werewolves go home. Goodbye, guys.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good plot point campaign. It certainly, gives a good feel of what the setting is about. The end is a tad anticlimactic to me, and I'm not going to get into details, but yeah, that's lacking a little bit, but it's good. And then if you use the hooks, because you don't have like a dozen Savage Tales to complement that plot point campaign, you get the 7 acts, and they cover about 10 pages, and that's it. So basically, you have some work to do as a GM if you want to run that plot point campaign, which is okay with most GMs. They're willing to do that. They want to do that. But some people, like Gary, just wants to grab the book and read it from paragraph to paragraph and run it, like that. You can't do that with Accursed.
As discussed earlier, I'm going out tonight. So what we're going to do now is we're going to answer some questions from listeners, and then we'll summarize our thoughts on the game. Okay. But yeah, that sounds awesome. So. First up, so what we can do, Eric, is I'll just ask you them all, and if there's none, if there's some that you think are crap, just cut them out. First up, we got one from Matt Stark. He says, "My only information so far is from this review, and I'm not sure I understand the background information of how things developed. Can you expand on this so I can better understand it? I think it sounds like a good setting that I'd like to try, but the PDF price is a little high. I have to wait for the sale on DriveThruRpg. Well, as you know, it's going on sale, mate. Thanks to Eric. Well, thanks to Eric and John, of course.
And John, yeah. And yeah, as for the background, I think think I've spoken in length about this. So
yeah, so so there you go, Matt. I mean, if you wanted to know the background, well, there's a little bit more detail. And now, pick the bloody thing up because it sounds awesome. And we got one in from the Murder Hobo Show, aka Gary. I think he's a little bit jealous that he's not on this bonus episode, and he's trying to sabotage it because he comes in with a bloody stupid question. He says, "Can I play a gypsy who curses everyone with irritable bowel syndrome so they immediately poop themselves in the style of Dumb and Dumber?" Eric, you want to field that one?
Yeah, you could. That'd be a trappings to Accursed power, I think.
Good. Conrad Erasmus Neubert comes in. He says, "What type of horror is the setting aiming for? And what's the setting's atmosphere like?" Although we've sort of gone over the background there, Eric, what type of horror would you say it is? Because I know that obviously what the background is like, but I don't necessarily know what atmosphere that it goes for. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, of course, on the cover you've got something a bit graphic there with, hanging bodies, but I don't think it's a very graphic horror violence type of setting. To me, I get the Brothers Grimm, Maleficent kind of vibes, Ravenloft, that type of horror. Not really. It's not like Lovecraftian cosmic horror.
Like gothic adventure.
Yeah, gothic. That's a good description, I think.
So he follows up with also, how much lore do you need to know to run a few adventures?
I think just in that book, you've got plenty of lore to run a whole campaign with it. Even though it's quite well supported, there are a bunch of supplements on the various countries, the various realms, and some adventures too. But I think you've got all you need in that book.
But he's saying he just wants to run a few adventures. Would you recommend it for doing that, or is the lore too deep just to run a couple? Because, for example, if you wanted to run just a couple of 50 Fathoms games, you could probably do that just by taking a quick glance at the book and not really getting too deep into it. But is this the type of book where you could do that?
Yeah, you could. It'd be difficult to capture the whole, because the lore is so rich. But I think you can, especially if you keep it to one place. You pick just one land and you keep it to place. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay, so we had quite a few in from Kirk Leeson. He sent us an absolute buttload of questions, so I am just going to pick one at random. He says, does the game push the players towards the accepting or rejecting their monster? No, that's rubbish. Actually, these aren't very good, so we're not going to answer any of them. But
no, I mean, there's a question there. Are the available adventures for Accursed? Well, I don't have any, so I can't answer that. Is there a main driving force behind all the evil?
Yeah, we've sort of answered all of these, though, so we might as well let's just pretend I never answered that and we'll cut all of this out. So that's pretty much it for the questions. We did get a couple of others in, but we pretty much answered them throughout the course of the podcast. So thank you very much to those who sent them in.
Yeah, thank you. Because that helped that helped the show. But obviously, I couldn't shut up for this episode. I just want to conclude by saying, so if I love this setting so much, why haven't played it? The answer. Well, maybe that's I've touched on this before. So you've got, with so many settings for Savage Worlds, when I'm going to try a new one, I'm going to look at the support, the free downloads, that type of thing. Mainly free pre-gens and a free one sheet. This is something that Accursed doesn't have. Admittedly, you can get them and they're quite cheap for like $1.75 or $2.50 50 cents, something like that. It's quite cheap. But if I have the choice between paying that or getting them for free from another setting, I'm going to go for the free ones. I understand there's a cost associated with producing these, but Accursed has had 2 Kickstarter campaigns to fund their line. To me, there's no excuse there. There should have been a free pre-gen and at least one free one-sheet somewhere in there.
A free one-sheet is like advertising, man. I mean, the way I see it is you can just get the word out there. I mean, a lot of the products you release on Just Insert Imagination are pay what you want, and the way you put it is download it for free, and then if you like it, come back and chuck $1 later, because then people are gonna play it because it's free, and it gets people interested in the thing, and then they can pay money. And the same goes for if you've got like a free one sheet for a setting that maybe describes a little part of the world. I'm going to play the hell out of that. Like, I would play a one set sheet of this to get my players interested in it, and then might then go and buy the book. So yeah, I think they should be free as well. But I think that the actual setting sounds amazing. It sounds incredible. I would play the hell out of this. But the only thing is I'm kind of playing a fantasy campaign at the moment, so it'll probably be bloody ages before I did.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the themes are a bit similar to Solomon Kane. I think the monster part. Of course, you don't play a literal monster in Solomon Kane, but it's still the same vibe. It's still dark fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you want some pre-gens and one sheet, you can get Fall of the Tower. I think it's about $2, and you get pre-gens in there and a free adventure, so you can try it. One thing I like about one thing that came to mind when I was reading this is the Accursed remind me, and this is no offense to war veterans, but they remind me of war veterans because you were in a war, the war is over, you come back, you can't find your place in the world anymore, and that's how I would try to role play in Accursed, even though I've never been to war. I can't claim to know what it's like, but this is kind of how I imagine it.
Well, I mean, it's like those characters, they've been through something kind of similar in a fantasy setting, so it means that they're all going to have seen some stuff, man, and they're going to have been through some stuff, so it means they'll be I don't want to say like broken, but they'll be kind of like damaged or have some emotional scars in some way, and I think that makes it very cool, because you're not just a cool werewolf wearing sunglasses, you're a werewolf with some problems.
Yep. I mean, this setting, to me, it feels like old school Savage Worlds. I mean, we've seen changes in how Savage Worlds settings are designed now, where there's a bit more bloat to them. This is very lean. If you go from one setting to another and you play this, you don't have a whole lot of different mechanics to keep in mind. You could run it, without the setting rules in the book if you wanted to, and it has so much flavor that it's just a good, lean, typical Savage Worlds setting to me. Like, it was written for it, and it beautiful. So A+ for that. Even using Acceptance or Defiance, if you don't want to play Accursed, but to use Acceptance and Defiance in other games. Harrison mentioned the World of Darkness line over there. You could easily use that in your own homebrew, vampire, Savage Vampire the Masquerade game. It would work well. Something else too that I thought about, because a while ago I ran a zombie survival campaign where one of the themes was humanity. How do you keep your humanity by, having to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. Basically, the whole society collapses. The whole, do you turn into an animal in order to survive, or do you maintain your humanity through everything that you go through? So you could use that instead of acceptance and defiance, could be humanity, or what's it called? The end justifies the means, basically. And you could have certain benefits depending on which way you go. If you want to maintain your humanity, maybe you get more bennies. If you want to do the end justify the means, maybe you don't get scared so easily when you encounter, horrific stuff. So I think there's value to using this in other settings too. But Harrison, I'll let you get pretty for your night out.
Thank you very much. I mean, Lord knows I need the time. I was unfortunately born a monster. I am part werewolf, part mummy, and as a result, I need to really, really layer on the makeup thick. If you're listening to this, I hope some people listen to this. I hope I didn't bore you too much. It was a pleasure reading this book. Sometimes, even though I love RPGs, obviously, reading the book sometimes is a chore to me, but not this one. It was a pleasure to read, and I hope I can run it one of these days, because it's really good. And now maybe you guys want to run it too, and now's the time because it's going on sale, people. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have the Horror Companion or Accursed. Accursed? Is it Accursed or Accursed? I don't know, who cares?
I don't know.
So anyway, if any listeners have got one going spare, hit me up, I'll give you my address. Let me know. Alright, cheers.
Bye.
The Wild Die Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respected owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Die Podcast.